There's a pretty good chance you've never seen the low-res standard def video that's on your screen right now before 2020, unless your name is George Lucas or one of the very few people that helped create it. What you're watching right now has been kept under wraps, unreleased, well, with the exception of a now private Vimeo video that almost no one discovered, for maybe as long as the past 8 years. It's raw footage, test footage, created to show a studio or a network what the final product will look like should they decide to pick it up and bring it to series. This footage on your screen is the only known footage from a TV show that was reportedly in development for almost 7 years. This is Star Wars Underworld, and it is maybe the coolest, weirdest television show that the world never got a chance to see. So weird, in fact, that it potentially involved the Emperor's love life, and so cool that a lot of what you've seen in Disney's Solo movie may have been ideas sprung from this very show. But I guess the real question is, what really is this? And is it possible that if this had worked, that Disney might not own Star Wars today at all?
This console has been compromised. Lock down the area and search the vehicle.
In 2005, George Lucas put together a team of writers that had worked on things like Battlestar Galactica, writers that had played a role in previous Star Wars products, and, well, himself, and brought them to Skywalker Ranch.
But when you've made some of the most popular movies of all time, you can set up shop anywhere you please. Exactly what George Lucas has done here at the magnificent Skywalker Ranch in Northern California.
Over the next few years, an idea would slowly begin to coalesce into something more tangible, a Star Wars TV series. Now, this wasn't like the Clone Wars or a piece of the more non-traditional extended universe. George treated this like the movies. He wanted what became known as Star Wars Underworld to be some of the most important pieces of Star Wars canon, to fill in some of the most important holes in that canon. And he wanted to make sure that even though it was going to be on television, that no concessions were made. So over the next few years, 50 episodes were written. That's right, 50 episodes. 2 full 25-episode seasons were hammered out in script form, all before any network could even get a pilot on the air. And this footage you're seeing now would be created, and word would start to spread, so much so that even God of War game creator Cory Barlog would fly out to read some of the scripts to potentially partner on a tie-in video game. But it's what Underworld was that makes it so sad it never happened.
Plans have been acquired. We will need weapons and your best soldiers.
Lucas had big story ideas for Underworld. In fact, what if I told you he was essentially ready to create this movie long before Disney did? Lucas had a lot of ideas, but he really wanted the show to explore the time period between episodes 3 and 4. But as you can see, he wanted to take a much more on-the-ground Blade Runner approach, but on Coruscant. As Den of Geek reported, he wanted to tell the story of a galaxy of crime, the Underworld, of young Han Solo. He wanted to put to screen the story of how Han and Chewbacca met, the story of how Lando lost the Falcon. But what's far more interesting to me is that Underworld attempted to tell the story of the Emperor. Barlog told VentureBeat that the scripts he saw included a serious backstory for the Emperor, one that explained how he ended up on the dark side and where his life went south. He told him that the scripts he read actually made the Emperor a sympathetic character that you could feasibly care about. Weirdly enough, it was love, apparently, that was going to change the Emperor. A heartless woman would ruin his life and his perception of the world around him, which obviously is a strange subplot to hear now, but according to Cory, it was well done. In fact, the Emperor and Han weren't the only important figures set to appear on the show. Even Vader was apparently written into the scripts. But it all fell apart rather unceremoniously. So what happened? And what exactly does all this have to do with Disney and their current ownership of Star Wars? Well, look at this footage, and let's take a look at the landscape of television viewership over the past 2 decades. By the time George was ready to get Underworld into production, media had begun to shift, and so had the narrative surrounding it. Streaming was beginning its relatively quick rise, and television viewership was beginning its equally quick decline. But worse yet, the Game of Thrones of the world, the Stranger Things, weren't options. Paid cable hadn't yet proven an audience large enough to support this multi-million-dollar production, and Netflix wouldn't introduce its first original show until 2013. So Lucas had a decision to make. He could either pitch this massively expensive idea to television networks, but then he'd only get 44 minutes an episode and a metric ton of commercials interspersed in between, or he could take it to a premium service in HBO and risk a smaller audience. Instead, it just kind of sat there. Too expensive for the landscape of television at the time, too early for the advent of original streaming products. It is strangely unique in that had it been envisioned just a few years later, it probably would be on our television screens and our phones today. But it's also unique in what its failure meant for Star Wars, and that's where Disney comes in.
It's over, Anakin! I have the high ground!
In 2012, the Underworld project was officially buried, the moment that Disney finalized their acquisition of the IP. But what I think is kind of crazy is just how the show could have changed that. Lucas was heavily involved in the production and writing of Underworld, and given this test footage, it's clear that they may have had the world's first Star Wars Game of Thrones on their hands. Remember, this would have been the first bit of live-action Star Wars since the prequels had released in theaters. It would have been earth-shattering, and had it found a home on TV or even streaming, A, the cost of the acquisition by Disney likely would have gone up astronomically, and B, I don't know that George would have been incentivized to sell Star Wars at all. The show likely would have run for many years, especially given that 2 seasons were written before it was even picked up, and had the show been of any kind of quality at all, it would have certainly maintained the numbers to stay on the air because, well, it's Star Wars. And had it came to fruition, suddenly Star Wars is back, front and center in the zeitgeist of popular culture in a new, meaningful, and substantive way. Maybe, if Underworld happens, the new trilogy never coalesces. Maybe the show spurns a new Lucas trilogy. Maybe we never get this. Star Wars Underworld is one of the most incredible, interesting, canceled unknowns in the history of modern media. Its existence was mere rumor for so long that a lot of the reporting done on the show, and even the old Vimeo video, seemed like rumor or fantasy. And yet its potential, this Blade Runner-esque mobster Star Wars tale, really feels every bit like the very thing that would set the world on fire in today's television and streaming space. With all the mistakes, missteps, and questionable decisions made by Lucas and Lucas Entertainment after the original trilogy, this feels so distinctly like a sure thing. A small green flower sticking out of the desert Tatooine sand. But let's be real. If this happened, we may never have gotten this again, and I mean, come on, this was worth it. I have a tiny little addendum I want to add to the end of this video, but first, if you enjoyed this video, press that like button down below. As always, if you haven't yet done so, press subscribe as well. If you press subscribe, that'll make sure you don't miss anything that I put out on this channel. Also, next to the subscribe button is a little bell. That's the notification bell, so you'll only be notified when I upload a video, so press that little bell next to the subscribe button as well. Now, really quickly, I do want to say something about Star Wars Underworld. First off, there is a great in-depth write-up by Den of Geek about the show if you want to check that out. But what I would like to add is that what Disney's done with The Mandalorian has been incredibly impressive, but I will say that if there's any light at the end of the tunnel for something like Star Wars Underworld to exist today, I think The Mandalorian is maybe doing a great job of showing that Underworld could and should exist, and that this universe is ripe with stories to tell that you might not be able to in just 2 hours. Again, not sad necessarily that it doesn't exist, but it definitely could and maybe should be something that Disney thinks about revisiting, even if they don't necessarily have the rights to that idea. I obviously don't know all the details of that particular end of the buyout, but anyways, on your screen right now are 2 more episodes of Nerdstalgic. If you enjoyed this video, you can click on either of those to see more of what I've done recently, and hopefully I will see you guys in the next video.